Welcome to the Tale of the Tape Boxing Podcast. Coming to you from the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas. Bringing you exclusive interviews with the biggest names in the boxing industry, both in and out of the ring. The Tale of the Tape Boxing Podcast is brought to you by Alvini & Associates Financial Services. Now, here's your host, Amal Shah.
Welcome into Tale of the Tape Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Amal Shah, from the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. We are joined right now by Joyce, the WBA gold champion and former silver medalist in Rio, as well as his manager, Sam Jones. You can find both of these gentlemen on social media. You can follow Joe on Twitter at Joyce Boxing. You can follow Sam on Twitter as well. He's pretty busy on there, so he's a good follow at Mr. Sam Jones 88. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you hate to be pulled away from the training camp, but unfortunately, globally, we've all been impacted by the coronavirus. First off, I want to ask you, hopefully your friends and family, everyone is safe back home across the pond.
Yeah, they're all doing okay, actually. They're safely tucked in the house, quarantined, and been social distancing, and everyone. Mine's fine.
Sam, hopefully the same goes for you as well.
Yeah, everyone's there. My dad's like hiding under a rock somewhere. My grandma's not even allowed out of a house, and I'm doing fine. We're lucky and blessed. Everyone's okay.
Well, glad to hear that, gentlemen. This segment is brought to you by Alvini & Associates. You can find them online at alviniassociates.com, ALVINI associates.com. Check them out for all your financial services needs, whether it's taxes or investing. They do a terrific job. Check them out, again, at alviniassociates.com. Joe, you were in the middle of training camp. You were getting ready for a title fight against Dubois, and all of a sudden the camp just came to a screeching halt. Take us through the process of what happened. You were going to fight on April 11th, and then when did you depart Las Vegas, and what was the situation like? Were you guys on one of those last flights off the island?
Yeah, so we was well into the training camp. We was training in the UFC facility. For the strength training, and also Ishmael Salas has got a new gym, so we're training there as well. So we didn't really notice when it kicked off so much. Like, we didn't notice a difference until like the last couple of days. I think we went out on the weekend before we left for food, and we noticed that normally this kind of place would be like busy, full of people, but there wasn't that many people out. Everyone was kind of staying indoors, and then we found out our last flight was the last flight to get back to the UK was on the Tuesday. So my other manager, Adam, managed to book us flights back to go on Tuesday. To go on Sunday. So we flew back because there would have been no more flights to go back on the Tuesday.
It was a nightmare. The whole thing was crazy because I left because I had meetings with Frank Warren because I had been keeping an eye on the whole situation. I think myself and Mike was talking about it like that it could cause some serious problems. Like, we didn't really know the severity of it, but I had always been keeping an eye on like the updates from China and watching it spread. But obviously I didn't want to distract Joe from his camp and like worry him too much about it. But the last few days of when I was just before I was scheduled to leave, it was getting worse and worse and worse, and I thought, you know what, this fight could be getting called off, and it's going to be it's really sad and upsetting because Joe had trained so hard. I had my other fighter out there, Lerone. Joe was sparring a young prospect called Jeremiah Milton, and it was the whole camp was great. It was great vibes and expensive camp as well. Like, and in boxing, as you know, you don't get it back. It's self-employed business, so it was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sam. Unfortunately, you put in all that time and energy, Joe, that you had. By the way, though, it does make for a great story. You guys went out for a meal and you basically never came back. That's usually like the story of a breakup with a girl. Hey, I told her I'm going out and I never came back.
The hangover.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
And then we woke up in England.
I see a movie here in the making here with Joyce starring role here. Joe, you were training with Ishmael Salas here in Las Vegas. Tell us how that came about in terms of your engagement with him. He's done a terrific job with other fighters in the past, but for a guy that's going to be fighting in London to be coming across the pond, 8-hour time difference, a little bit of an adjustment from a weather standpoint, and not necessarily your familiar surroundings. Considering back home, obviously you have a lot more familiarity. How was that, and what was that? How did that come about?
So it all started when I made the choice to go with David Hay and Richard Schaefer. I started talking to Sam about who I'm going to go with, and he helped me out with that. And then so we signed a deal with David Hay and Richard Schaefer, and David Hay was getting ready for fighting Tony Bellew, and he got Salas to come and fly over and train him and the Haymaker stable. So I started training with Ishmael since then, and our first camp was actually in Vegas. We flew out there and did the whole first camp there before my debut. So we've done 3 camps so far now, and that last one obviously got cut short.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Got cut short, but your training camp, whether in Las Vegas or anywhere else, has been stellar. You've gotten off to a terrific start in your career, 10-0 for people that are unaware. 9 wins coming by KO. Joe, my only criticism of you as a fighter is you're not giving me as a fight fan my money's worth. You've knocked out 5 guys in the first 2 rounds or less.
Yeah, I think my last fight a year ago now was against. Whoa, what's his? Help me out, Sam, quickly.
Brian Jennings.
Oh, Joe's been asleep. Brian Jennings.
Brian Jennings. Yeah, we went the whole 12, so that was people watching that got their money's worth. But a lot of them would end in the first or second round by a big Joyce juggernaut hook.
Joe, I'll tell you, I love the nickname Juggernaut. You just alluded to it. I want to take people a little bit through your background. You're not just a boxer. You have a very interesting and diverse background. You grew up playing other sports. I saw you were into track and field. I was going to reference a name, but it's probably way before your time. But being from Britain, you know the name Daley Thompson, who was at one time considered one of the greatest athletes in the world. I've actually met him. He's got a gym where I grew up in Putney. It's called Daily Fitness, and I've actually met him, and I trained there at his gym for a little bit as well. He's a great guy, and what he did in sport was phenomenal. He put how many gold medals is that? He won
like four gold. More than that, isn't it?
He was the greatest athlete. He was back-to-back.
He's got a whole load of gold medals anyway.
Well, I was happy that you knew who he was, because I remember I was saying to Mike Leonardi, who's helping us out here producing the podcast, he says to me, he goes, he's a young guy, very articulate, very intelligent. I said, man, he's got to know one of the greatest athletes to ever come out from the Union Jack. And boom, here you go. You've been to his gym. You know the gentleman. That's fantastic. So you had interest in a variety of other things. How did boxing come into your life? Because a lot of guys get into boxing at a young age, whether in their teen years or even before that. But you really didn't take up boxing until later on.
Yeah, so I started off doing martial arts. I did karate, kickboxing, kung fu, capoeira, and when I was doing kickboxing as a teenager, we'd do sparring with just hands or hands and feet, and that's why I really liked that kind of sparring, because when we just did hands, I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I was athletic. I was into athletics at uni, and I was getting a bit bored of it. And over the summer, I thought I'd give boxing a go again. I mean, try out boxing, because it's a bread and butter martial art. It's it's got so technical in its simplicity, because it's only your hands. You're only using your hands. It's not your feet, your elbows, everything else. It's just your hands. But in its simplicity, it's very complicated. If you know what I mean. And you keep on improving, and you're not so geared about training for belts. You're on the way to win belts for money. So that obviously, I just really fell in love with it, because I've never tried it before, and when I did, I really loved the training, the skipping, the pads, hitting the bag, and then sparring. It's like a whole new world for me, because doing the kickboxing, it was light sparring. You was like kind of tapping the person, but with boxing, you can punch as hard as you like.
Absolutely, you've got a lot of power to unleash at 6 feet 6 inches tall, about 197, 198 centimeters. I mean, you've got a lot of power there behind that punch. But I think with some of the early success that you had in terms of the European Championships, you win gold at the 2014 Commonwealth Games, you win gold at the 2015 European Championships. I would assume that really kind of catapulted you and your interest even more so as you continue to move forward, because success generally breeds interest and just a fondness for whatever you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you set targets for yourself. My first target was to win the ABAs. This is like a national competition for boxers, and then they go on to get onto the GB team. So that was my next target, and I got onto the GB team, and then I go to this tournament. I want to win a gold medal, and then I go and win it, and then it goes on like that. And then before that, it was always my dream to win, to go to the Olympics and to win a gold medal. And I was trying to get there through athletics, but boxing was the door that opened for me.
Well, I tell you what, you mentioned the Olympics in Rio in 2016. Joe won the silver medal. You talk about an accomplishment. As a person who grew up in the United States, I can remember the Los Angeles Olympics in 1984, and what a big deal it was. You guys had the Olympics there in London.
1984.
Hey, man. Hey, listen.
That was the year before I was born.
I already had Sam giving me a hard time because he's born in 88. I know you're born in 85. Hey, listen, I'm reminded on
85 is a good year, let me tell you that.
I agree with you. It was a great year, and in the world of sports, it was a fantastic year. I want to ask you, though, you see the Olympics in London in 2012. I have a friend of mine and competed in Sydney in 2000 and won a gold medal, and I tell him all the time, I said, is there ever a greater introduction line than, hey, by the way, I competed in the Olympics and I won a gold medal. In your case, you won a silver medal. To really fulfill that dream under the Union Jack, take me through a little bit of what that meant and how proud you had to be, and your family and everyone around you, how proud they were of you.
When I got back from Rio, my mum threw a street party, so the whole, I think you call it block parties.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was packed, and it's an amazing feeling and such a proud moment. To go into schools and bring my medal and talk about it and show people my medal. Like loads of people, but it's very rare opportunity to even see a medal up close and to hold it. It's
you met the Queen as well, didn't you, Joe?
Sorry.
You met the Queen, didn't you, as well?
Oh, yeah, I shook the Queen's hand. Yeah, I met William and
Harry, Prince Harry.
No, he skipped, because we was in a queue. He skipped the queue because I was talking to Harry and Kate. Sorry, William and Kate for so long. We were just chatting, and then Harry moved on to the next group. But yeah, it was. We're sipping Mum's champagne in the in Buckingham Palace.
Hey, Sam, listen, as a tourist, to be able to go visit the outside of Buckingham Palace, it's very exciting. But I guess in Joe's case, he's had so much success that you can kind of forget every once in a while whether you met the Queen or Prince William or what have you.
If I went near the Buckingham Palace gate, there'd be snipers waiting for me.
Sniper.
Joe, so you have tremendous success at the Olympics. Then you decide to turn pro. You have your first pro fight in October of 2017. And since then, my God, you have just been on a tear. Within basically less than a 2-year stretch, you have 10 professional fights, tremendous success, 9 KOs, won by unanimous decision. In case you forget, again, that was against Bryant Jennings. You went the distance in that one, but that was a UD for you. What was it like to have so many fights back to back? It's almost like you're in training camp every day of your life for 2 years.
Yeah, it's something that I'm quite used to by now. All the years, this is my way of life. And see, when I was on the GB team, I'll be training all year and fighting. I think 1 year I fought almost 20 times. So
wow.
But professional fights, obviously, they go on longer, and there's I've lost the thread of what I was going to say.
For people that don't know, Joe's got 10 professional fights. Of course, he's undefeated. He's getting ready to fight Daniel Dubois. But before that, you also fought in the World Series of Boxing, had 16 matches there. So you really were able to gain some other experience, and it served you well so far. In terms of the Daniel Dubois, you took some time off. You fought Bryant Jennings in July of 2019 at the London O2 Arena, which I would have to say, to me, there are 4 places I look at where a fight takes place. It's just legendary. Whether it's at the O2, I know the O2's only been around since 2007. But there, Madison Square Garden in New York City, the MGM Grand Garden in Las Vegas, or the Staples Center in Los Angeles. You've had the opportunity to be able to fight at the Staples Center, fought on that Wilder Fury undercard in Los Angeles. You fought at the O2. I mean, talk about for a kid growing up in England, what it means to be able to now compete again for a title fight again in your hometown area there in England.
Oh, it's amazing! I was really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to when it finally does happen, and I can box in them arenas again, and I'd love to box in Vegas. That'd be a dream for me.
We'd love to have you here in Las Vegas. I think people are going to get to really see your talent. You've been compared to George Foreman in terms of your punching power. Is there anybody in the heavyweight division or maybe in some of the other divisions that you look up to or admire, past fighters that you thought either your style is similar or you just really have an affinity for how they box?
There's Joe Lewis. I looked at him. There's Teofilo Stevenson. So obviously Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, boxing. There's some big names.
Some huge names, as you alluded to. You're absolutely right. Terrific fighters, to say the least. Joe, your career's gotten off to a stellar start, but I want to kind of take people back through a little bit of your background. You have studied in the United States. Tell people what you studied, and you also were involved in an extracurricular activity at Sacramento State, the Hornets over there, when you were doing your time over there at Sac State.
Yeah, so I did my first semester of my final year in university, and I studied fine art. So when I came over to Sac State University, I did my major in fine art, and I also other curricular activities was I ended up joining the cheerleading team for that 5 months I was there, and that's when I actually learned how to do a back tuck, which I do for some of my celebrations in my fight after I win.
I loved your post-fight celebration in Rio.
Yeah, I was saving the backflip for the final. But,
when he got robbed.
I got robbed, so no one got to see it. But yeah, that was good. Did you see me kicking Corona's ass on Instagram?
I did. I did see that. Speaking of Instagram, go ahead and give me your Instagram. I try to stay off Instagram because I realize the girls now are too young for me. So to at least let everybody else know that's on Instagram what your IG is.
It's just the same. It's Joe Joyce Boxing.
Fantastic. Joe Joyce Boxing on Instagram or on Twitter, and also at Mr. Sam Jones 88 on Twitter. Sam, how did you and Joe come about to work together? You guys both have really interesting personalities. Sam is very outgoing, very vivacious. Joe's a little bit more reserved, but very intelligent and articulate. Tell me a little bit about how your relationship came about, and then get into, Sam, a little bit how you got involved in the fight game, because a lot of people like myself who have zero athletic ability, love sports, but want to be involved in sports. And I went into the broadcasting side, but you're right there in the business of sports.
Yeah, I'm like the lucky fat person that's involved in sport that's not an athlete. Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean?
No, I was not bad at sports, like to be honest, but I was never gifted at anything. But I can do most things, but never gifted. Do you know what I mean? Sure. Joe's a gifted athlete in many things. The funny thing is, when people say our personalities are different, Joe's got like more intelligence in his big toe than I've got in my whole body. It's just that I'm loud and I can get away with it. Do you know what I mean? It's just that he's Joe's like he's a reserved character. Do you know what I mean? Like if you like Mike's met Joe off camera, and he knows his personality. He's got a really big personality. He's like very intelligent to speak to. But it's just that I come from a different background, like a sales background, where I was an auctioneer, so I'm used to speaking over a microphone. So I'm loud by nature. So that's just where that kind of comes from. But when my first deal in boxing was, crazy enough, was with Floyd Mayweather, because I got Savannah Marshall, who made a professional debut on the undercard of Conor McGregor against Floyd Mayweather. So I did my first deal with Floyd Mayweather. Like I met him for 5 minutes in London. I got hold of him through one of his friends who was a director of the film All Eyes on Me. It's a crazy story. And then he FaceTimed me at 3:00 in the morning, Floyd Mayweather, to confirm that he's going to sign Savannah. He signed Savannah on the biggest undercard of all time. And I kind of started at the top in boxing. And then obviously I was fortunate enough to sign Joe as my first signing, which again, without Joe, I don't think I would have had the profile. I think I would still be in boxing, but I don't think I would have had the profile and I started at the top, and it was like mainly because of Joe.
Well, yeah, no question about it. But I have a feeling with your personality, whether it's with Joe Joyce, the Juggernaut, or the silent assassin, Savannah Marshall, I have a feeling you'd do well in any endeavor just based on your personality. I love your energy and your enthusiasm that you bring to the table.
That. I appreciate that.
Joe, I want to get back to, Sam alluded to it earlier. You talked about training here in Las Vegas. So let's go through a little bit of your fight preparations for the April 11th bout that was coming up with Daniel Dubois. When did you get to Las Vegas, and where were you at mentally in terms of your prep? Obviously, you got halted in the middle of March, about a month away from the fight, but I feel like you're probably in a good position mentally simply because you had been so active in terms of fighting, but you finally got an opportunity to get a little bit of rest because your previous fight against Jennings ended in July.
Yeah, so...
Joe, tell him about the Marco Huck situation as well. You was meant to fight in January.
So we're supposed to have a fight against Marco Huck for the European title, which was supposed to be earlier in
January the 10th
the season. So maybe like November, December, and then it finally got made in December, and I was getting prepared for that, and then he got injured, so had to stop. So I've been quite unlucky this year. I mean,
very unlucky.
Yeah, very unlucky. And you know what? I'll tell you what. For Huck was lucky. He was going to get injured either way. But the reality of it is,
he was going to get bashed up.
It would have been a good fight, though. Entertaining the fight. He comes forward, he throws loads of punches. It'd have been a barnstormer, especially in his hometown in Hanover, Germany.
You're absolutely right. And he's a guy who's a little bit older than you, and so you've gotten off to a very fast start in your career. For people that have not had the opportunity to see you fight yet, what would you say your best strength, or you look at and say, hey, this is really where I can rest my head in terms of my ability?
So I have a great engine. I throw a lot of punches, and I can throw with force and knock guys out. And I think my technical ability is improving. I'm not as stiff as I once was in the amateurs, and I've learned how to use my head movement more and my footwork, and really get a good balance when I'm throwing my shots. So I keep on improving. I've been in the sport since I was 22. I started boxing 22, so I've managed to, with my skills, just to improve and get better by each fight, and make my way slowly to the top, to the heavyweight champion of the world.
Ironically, Joe was, I know everyone says this, but do you know in that camp, when the last camp in Las Vegas, I'm deadly serious when I say this, and I've been with Joe from every single minute of every one of his camps. At the beginning of the camp, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. Joe then turned into some possessed beast, and it was the best camp I've ever seen him. It's the best I've ever seen him. Like in Spot Mike was there. He turned into a possessed animal over the last. He was peaking just at the right time, and Joe was going to do. Believe me when I say this, Joe was going to do a job on Daniel Dubois. I know not many people think that's the truth, and they think I'm waffling, but Joe was going to do a right number on him.
Let me tell you something, Sam. I always, one thing in fighting, I always look at, look, the camp better have belief in their fighter, and you guys definitely have that. And I always hate when people discount somebody. I always go back to the fight with Buster Douglas and Mike Tyson. You know, everybody in the world outside of Buster Douglas thought Mike Tyson was going to mop the floor with him. Well, it didn't happen. And the reality is we see it constantly. We saw with A.J. Anthony Joshua, it looked like it was just a tune-up fight. Next thing you know, he goes down. And to me, when you have a fighter of Joe's caliber, Olympic medalist.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, you can't.
It's mad disrespect. It's mad disrespect because when Buster Douglas fought Mike Tyson, the odds were correctly in Tyson's favor. We're talking about a man who's had WSB fights. He's beaten somebody like Filip Hrgovic, who's being touted as the next big thing. He's been with Alexander Usyk, who's looking like he's probably the best pure boxer on the planet. He's been in there, he's mixed with him. He's beaten Majidov. He's beaten all these guys, and they're saying this 21-year-old kid who's never beaten anybody other than some Latvian road sweepers think they can come and mess with Joyce. He's going to get his head punched in.
Sam, I want to know, have you trademarked that Latvian street sweepers? Because I usually go with the tomato can, but I like your reference better.
No, I prefer to give them some kind of name tag because, look, you've got to respect them. But let's be honest, the guys who Daniel Dubois has beaten, I could sit on Joe's shoulders and beat half of them.
I don't disagree with you. That's the one thing when you look at his track record, he really hasn't fought anybody. And I think so many times in boxing we do this. We give young fighters props, and it's not meant to be disrespectful, but we kind of prop them up a little bit because they've had success, but who have they really been challenged by? And I think so many times when they really fight someone like Joe, all of a sudden we really find out that's where the rubber meets the road.
They dismiss a fact. Look at the people that Joe's beat.
He is strong, but he hasn't proven himself yet. So it is a good fight.
Dubois is a great fighter. He's a great fighter, and he looks the part. He looks spectacular. But people don't forget, in Joe's earlier days, when Joe first started, Joe started on a 10-rounder against a guy called, I don't know whether you're familiar with him. It was a guy called Ian Lewison. Mm-hmm. He was coming off a 10-round TKO defeat against Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte's probably top 5 best heavyweights in the world right now. Dillian Whyte stopped him in 10 rounds. Joe beat him in the very next fight in 7 or 8. I think it was the 8th round with one arm. Joe had a hematoma in his lead hand, in his right arm, and could only use his lead hand in that fight. If you watch the fight back, Joe beat him with one hand.
So I was like dummy in the straight cross, and then just whipping the left hooks in.
He's been at the deep end. He's been at the deep end from the get-go. So when Joe fought Donny Palmer, and Donny Palmer's a friend of mine, so I don't want to disrespect Donny, but when he fought Donny Palmer, Joe knocked his block off in 35 seconds. That guy beat Dominic Breazeale in the amateurs. Joe's not fought anybody apart from one guy who was a late replacement. One single guy who's not come to win. Everyone's come to win. Even Stiverne, when he was at his... I know he was a big fat blob, but he came there and he was dangerous.
Mate, he hit me with some shots, man.
Yeah, big, dangerous guy. All of them wanted to win. Daniel Dubois, one fighter's probably come to win so far against Daniel Dubois.
And to your point, Sam, about how successful Joe has been, I was kind of going through before our interview in terms of his success. You look at the Brian Jennings fight, went the distance, and I've got a question for you coming up about that in just a second, Joe. But out of a possible 102 rounds, you've only fought 40 rounds. You have really destroyed people. It's been impressive. In the previous 9 fights, it only went 28 rounds. I mean, you've just gone in there. You've absolutely destroyed people, Joe. Facing Jennings and going 12 rounds.
Big juggernaut.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Big juggernaut.
Yeah, exactly.
Going 12 rounds against Jennings, do you think that helped you moving forward in your career in the sense that, Deontay Wilder, same thing. I was at his last fight against Tyson Fury here in Las Vegas. He was a guy, somebody had asked me before the fight on my show, hey, do you think Wilder can take a punch? I said, I don't know. I've never seen him get hit. And then we found out when Tyson hit him, it was lights out. In your case, though, now having gone the distance, I feel like personally that helps you out, whether it's against a Daniel Dubois or anybody else in the future. You know what it takes. It's not going to be just you show up in the ring and it's like Palmer and you knock him out in 35 seconds.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a big learning fight, and respect to Brian Jennings. He's a great fighter, very very slick and skillful. He's very hard to hit as well. He's got
very very hard
such
to
long
hit.
arms that his guard is like really hard to get through. And his footwork, his defense and counter shots is it's really good, and it's a really tough fight to go 12 rounds. But
people have disregarded your win, haven't they, Joe? People have disregarded it.
That. So, but them championship rounds, I can still push forward and get some, still throwing shots the same tempo as the first.
Hey, Sam, it doesn't matter if you win ugly or you win clean or however you win, as long as the referee raises your hand at the end of the fight.
100%. People disregard that win with Joe against Jennings, and I watched that fight and I thought Joe wasn't as physically strong as he usually is. I don't know what that. Listen, you can't be perfect every fight, but people don't understand. That was Joe's Jennings is coming off a loss against, who did he lose to? Oscar Rivas, the one before that. But other than that, I think he's only lost to Klitschko and Luis Ortiz. Do you know what I mean? That was Joe's 9th fight. I mean, who else is doing that in the heavyweight division? Nobody. No one's going to handpick Brian Jennings to fight. Not Hrgovic, not because Hrgovic's style is pretty, not similar to Joe's, but on paper, Brian Jennings does cause Joe problems. And I kind of blame myself for making that stylistic matchup, because Joe's never going to look good against somebody like that. But somebody like Daniel Dubois' side, believe it or not, is perfect for Joe, because he's eye level and he's just going to take leather in the face one after the next.
So how far from a world title fight against Fury or Joshua are you potentially, Joe?
I'll let Joe answer that question.
1 or 2 fights.
Let's go.
Beat up the bar, and then I don't know if they're available. Then next fight, or maybe another fight beforehand, and then
Big Booby Miller, again. Joe, in New York, isn't it? Big Booby Miller. We want him in New York.
I got a question for both of you. Right now, obviously, Joe, you're having a terrific career. Daniel Dubois is off to a fast start in his career. Anthony Joshua's had a tremendous career. Tyson Fury. What is it going on in the UK right now in terms of boxing? It seems like, Great Britain right now, we've got a ton of great fighters. We've had great fighters historically come from there as well. Lennox Lewis, a tremendous champion. But to me, it seems like when you look at the heavyweight division, it is residing on the other side of the pond right now.
Yeah, I think all of the top boxers seem to be coming from the UK right now. It's very, very popular. I think in America, there's so many other sports that I think a lot of the athletes tend to, end up being football players or basketball. There's so many other sports. So I think, and obviously there's the rise of UFC now. There's a lot of choice for different sports, whereas in England, I think that there's obviously soccer or football, as we call it, and boxing. There's been a big increase of talented boxers coming from the UK.
Well, you mentioned soccer. I got to go off on a tangent a little bit. I assume you.
Here we go.
Sorry, football.
I'm joking.
Hold on a second. Okay, let me get it correct. First of all, let me tell you something. I get up at 4:30 in the morning here every Saturday to watch the Premier League. So I want to know right now, who is it that you follow in the Premier League?
Who, me? I don't even watch football.
My team's not good enough to be in the Premier League.
As a kid, I used to watch.
Oh my gosh, you guys got relegated years ago or decades ago there, Sam?
The team below the Premier League, Derby County.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Not good enough to be in the Premier League.
That's fine. At least it saves you a lot of aggravation every Saturday and Sunday.
We've signed Wayne Rooney though, so that's a good thing.
Isn't Wayne Rooney? I think is about my age. I don't know if you want Wayne Rooney.
Oh come on, now he's 34. He's the same age as Joe.
What?
You look at Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney, they've been around since they were so young. It just seems like they're all in their 40s now, but they're not, exactly to your point. Hey, you mentioned, obviously, you were getting ready in training camp. So theoretically, when are we looking at a date for you to fight Daniel Dubois? I know a lot of things are up in the air, and a lot of it might be speculation, but how much time would you need to be able to get back into shape? Where are you right now physically, Joe?
I'm good, actually. I've been ticking over nicely. I've been cycling a lot around my area. There's where I live, there's a lot of greenery, so I've been doing my long runs, and there's a bit of decking outside my apartment that I can do like kettlebell swings and weights and stuff like that. So I've been ticking over nicely. So around these times I'll be starting to get back to to boxing. I've been doing shadow boxing as well. I've also got one of these VR headsets.
Yeah.
And you can fight people on the VR headset.
Don't get him started on this. Don't get him started on this.
Hey Sam,
Turn off the cameras.
hey Sam, I'm impressed he's been doing that. I've been lifting the remote control for the last 8 weeks.
No, listen,
so at least I'll be able to hit the ground running when we finally get a date. I mean, penciled in there's July 11th.
And to answer your question, when the next date is, if we had Donald Trump in charge of our country, Joe would be fighting on July the 11th, definitely. Because that guy doesn't give a shit about anything. So if we had him in charge, it'd be back to normal. But we've got our powers that be are gonna. I think you're not gonna see a. I don't know. It depends. Every day is different, isn't it?
Boris Johnson was saying something like next Monday or something is gonna. The quarantine's going to be loosened up or something.
You can loosen it up, but it's still going to be the damn same, isn't it? The virus is still there.
One final note on the Dubois fight. You trained in Vegas. What will you do in terms of training camp if the fight is July 11th? Because I'm assuming, are you going to be coming back to Las Vegas with Ishmael here in Las Vegas?
That's the plan.
Oh, very good. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fantastic. Hey, both of you gentlemen, really appreciate the time, the energy. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to your fight against Daniel Dubois and looking forward to you getting back out here in Las Vegas for training camp. It should be a lot of fun for all of us fight fans. Joe, thank you so much. Sam, thank you so much. You can find both of these guys on social media. You can find Joe on Twitter at Joe Joyce Boxing, on Instagram at Joe Joyce Boxing, and you can find Sam Jones on Twitter at Mr. Sam Jones 88. Gentlemen, we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Tale of the Tape Boxing Podcast. A special thank you to Joe Joyce and Sam Jones for joining us from across the pond today. Follow us on Twitter at Tale Tape Boxing. This has been a Mike Leonardi production.